Shabbat Shalom. I'm going to teach you something that perhaps you didn't know, which is that baseball is as old as the Bible itself. In fact, baseball is as old as creation itself. How do we know? Because the Torah tells us that Eve stole first, and Adam stole second. Cain struck out Abel. And of course, the giants and the angels were rained out. Yes, Owen, I can keep up with you, buddy. I actually turned to my son Eyal for that. He found that one. That was a good one. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs comes to teach us that we don't look to the Torah for science. We're not looking to the Torah to understand the rules of nature, at least not scientific nature. Rather, we look to the Torah to help us understand human nature. And at its core, that's what the Torah does. It really teaches us to understand who we are, to understand human nature, and thus our relationship with God and what God expects of us in this world. With that, we come to Parashat Bamidbar, the very beginning of the book of Numbers. And here we come to understand the tension and the blessing of both individualism, individuality, and community, the strength of community. I'll invite you to turn with me in your Eitz Chaim Chumashim. I'm on page 769 in the red book located in front of you, as we come to the very beginning of the book of Numbers with our Parashat Bamidbar. It says, Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe Bamidbar Sinai, Bohel Moed, Lachodesh Hasheni B'Shana Hashenit. On the first day of the second month, in the second year following the exodus from the land of Egypt. We're already in the fourth book of the Torah, and we've barely made it a year out of Exodus. And what's happened so far? The Jewish people have left Egypt and, of course, complained and wanted to turn back on multiple occasions. We've had the giving of the Torah at Sinai. We've had the golden calf. We've had the construction of the tabernacle. And still, we're only a year out of Egypt. And within that year, what have we read? Actually, 3 times that God has commanded a census of the Jewish people. Now, in a very plain read, a pshat read of our Torah portion this morning, we come to see that God, through Moses, is preparing our people to do battle. Why? Because the census he's taking is of men between the ages of 20 and 60, people of fighting age. Moses, as the chief of staff of the Israelite army, is taking account of how many soldiers he has in order to prepare the Israelites for war on their journey to the Promised Land. Now, Rashi comes to teach that this is not just about preparing for war, but rather God takes a census of the Israelites because God cares for each and every one of us. And so God takes the time, as often as God can, to take note of each and every individual. And we actually come to see that that is true as we continue our Torah reading. And you're welcome to turn with me to the next page, page 770. You see the Torah says, take a census of the whole Israelite community by the clans of its ancestral houses, listing the names, every male head by head. You and Aaron shall record them by their groups from the age of 20 years and up, all those in Israel who are able to bear arms. Then you turn to the next page, 771, and all we see is a list of names. Shlumiel, son of Zurishaddai, Nachshon, son of Aminadab, Nathanael, son of Zohar, and it continues with this list of names as God takes note of each and every general, of each and every member of the sub-leadership, and so on. God takes note of each and every individual. And actually, the beauty of the Hebrew, and not just the translation, is at the top of page 770. What does God tell Moses and Aaron? Se'u et rosh kol adat b'nei Yisrael. Lift up the heads of each and every person of the house of Israel. Lift up their heads. Give note to the value of each and every individual. And here we see, as the Torah tells us about human nature, we are reminded that sometimes when we forget about the individual, then groupthink takes over. When we forget about the individual, then it's much easier to go to war and to go to battle because all we see are big groups and we see big numbers. And it's easy to send an anonymous horde off to war than it is to send each and every individual. So what does God instruct us? Even as you go off to war, take note of each and every individual person, because every individual matters. And so we come to see later in the Talmud that our rabbis remind us that if you save only one life, it is as if you've saved the entire world. And later Maimonides will come to teach us that each and every person should see himself or herself as the one who could bring redemption. Because within each of our hands, within each of our hearts, is the power to bring peace to the world, if only we make the right choice. What we see here in our Torah portion this morning, what we see in the rabbinic texts, is what gives rise ultimately in the 20th century to the movement for human rights, to the idea that each and every person has self-worth, and that each and every person has a right to be protected and honored in this way. Each and every person should have their heads lifted up, because each and every person counts. At the same time, we know that as Jews, community matters. In Pirkei Avot, in the Mishnah, it tells us, Al tifrosh min hatzibur. Don't separate yourself from the community. We're obligated to be part of that bigger whole. And the Talmud also tells us, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Bazeh, that each and every member of the house of Israel is responsible for the entire whole. We're responsible for each other. We have an obligation to care for each other. Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Bazeh. So even though individuality matters, each and every person matters, and we have to honor each and every person, we're also obligated toward the community. We have an obligation to make ourselves part of that bigger whole, thereby strengthening the Jewish people. And here within Judaism, we see that tension between individuality on one hand and commitment to the community on the other hand. I'd like to suggest that in our own times and in our own way, we're struggling with a similar tension. If you remember, in the midst of COVID, we were among the first congregations to go online and to bring daily minyan, to bring Shabbat services online. It was a beautiful way to honor each and every individual, to recognize that we could still come together as community. To note that there's a way to bring each and every person to lift his or her head up and to come together as a community. And in those 3 years of wandering through the wilderness, we have eventually made our way back to a point where we are partially back in person for minyan, but not totally back in person for minyan. Zoom is a wonderful tool for those who can't make it. Zoom is a wonderful tool for the people who are obligated to be at work during prayer time. Zoom is a wonderful tool for those who can't physically get to Shaarey Zedek for prayer. But sometimes Zoom becomes a convenient excuse as well to not show up. Now, over the last year especially, but even the last couple years, I've had a few people who wanted to come for Yortzeit in person to minyan, who complained to me that we didn't have in-person minyan. Rabbi, I want to show up to honor my loved one by saying Kaddish, but it's only online. I'm going to go to another congregation. Now, the challenge of that, of course, is that when we want to show up that one day a year, that 2 days a year to say Kaddish. If there's no in-person minyan, it becomes a tension if we don't want to be online. At the same time, we can't keep a minyan going if people only show up once or twice a year. It is unfair of the individual to expect the community to always be there when the individual himself or herself isn't willing to show up more than once or twice a year. And that's true of our bigger whole as well. When we are in need, when we've lost a loved one, and we need to say Kaddish, we want the community to be there. When we have a celebration, a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah, an ufruf, a baby naming, and we want to celebrate with our community because that's how we do it as Jews. If we ourselves only show up once every 13 years, it's hard to keep a community going in that way. So as we think about this tension between individuality and community this morning of Parashat Bamidbar, I'd like to challenge each of us to think about how we might give a little more of ourselves for the sake of the community. How we might work a little harder to show up for that person who needs to say Kaddish for their loved one. How we might work a little harder to come on a Shabbat morning so that we can help someone's simcha be even more joyful. How we can maybe get back to a place, and I'm grateful to our ritual director, Saul Ruby, for his diligence in leading us back to in-person prayer, and also for the joy and the learning that he brings to that experience each and every day. And at the same time, I want as a community for us to continue to wrestle with how can we honor the individuals within our midst? How can we be kinder and more compassionate to each of those around us? Perhaps by introducing ourselves to someone we don't know, or various ways on the bima, or anything else that we can do to honor the individuals among us, and thus bring together that tension between individuality and community by following what God told Moses in our Torah portion, to lift up each and every head so that we honor the individuals among us with dignity and respect, but also so that when we each lift up our heads, we can see a big, beautiful community around us. My friends, we all have a little more work to do in that department. And I'm honored to share this journey through the wilderness with each and every one of you. The Torah does not tell us about nature. It doesn't tell us about science and nature in that way. But the Torah does tell us about human nature. It becomes real easy to ignore individuals and just focus on a big number. And we're wrong when we do that. It also becomes real easy human nature to get lazy and to say, I don't need to show up to shul this week. Somebody else will. And in those moments, we have to work a little harder ourselves to make sure that we're showing up for the Jewish people. The Torah doesn't just tell us really about nature, but it tells us about human nature. And it tells us that, yes, baseball goes all the way back to creation. Why? Because Eve stole first, Adam stole second, Cain struck out Abel, the angels and the giants were rained out. And when did it all happen? In the beginning. Think about it. In the big inning. Shabbat Shalom.